we're diving straight into what really makes English work.
Yeah, the nuts and bolts.
Exactly. The fundamental ways we build sentences, forget, dull grammar drills.
Right.
Our aim here is to give you a real feel for how it all clicks together so you can speak and understand with, well, genuine confidence. Think of it less like hitting the books.
And more like getting under the hood of the language.
Yeah, unlocking it.
Exactly. We've looked at some really insightful takes on English sentence structure. And what we want to do is pull out the crucial bits.
Right.
And show you how grasping these basics can, well, directly lead to smoother, more fluent communication for you.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We're going to focus on 3 key things in this exploration.
Okay.
First, that absolute workhorse of English. Subject-Verb-Object structure, SVO.
The classic.
Then we'll tackle those auxiliary verbs, which can sometimes be a bit confusing.
They can trip people up, yeah.
And finally, we'll look at some really useful structural similarities between English and other languages. We'll use Spanish as an example quite a bit, actually, because it also relies pretty heavily on that SVO pattern.
And what's interesting is how these 3 areas kind of layer on top of each other.
How so?
Well, understanding SVO gives you that solid base.
Okay.
Then you can see how auxiliary verbs add, extra shades of meaning.
Right.
And noticing the links to languages you might already know. That can make it all feel much more intuitive.
Less intimidating.
Exactly.
Right.
Ultimately, we want you to walk away with a practical grasp of English's architecture, how it's built.
Okay, chapter 1 then. Subject, verb, object, SVO. Now, the name might sound a bit, technical.
A little bit, yeah.
But honestly, this is the engine behind so many English sentences.
Absolutely fundamental.
So, simply put, subject, the person or thing doing the action. Verb, that's the action itself.
Right.
Object, the person or thing receiving the action.
Good summary.
Take, I eat apples.
Yeah.
Pretty simple.
Yep.
I is doing the eating.
Oh.
Eat is the action.
Yeah.
Apples are getting eaten.
Object.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. Right?
It does. And this SVO preference, it's not just random, is it?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's interesting how both English and Spanish, for instance, have evolved with this as a really dominant pattern.
So that means?
Well, for Spanish speakers learning English, the basic way of putting words together, it'll often feel surprisingly familiar right from the get-go.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting, I think.
Go on.
Consider the Spanish phrase, él está feliz.
Okay, he is happy.
Exactly. It translates directly. The subject is the same. Él becomes he.
Right.
The verb está, a form of ser, or estar, maps straight to is. And feliz, happy, stays happy. Same core structure, just different words plugged in.
And if you think about learning a language, spotting those direct structural parallels, it's a massive confidence builder.
Yeah, I can see that.
It gives you a sort of anchor point, like finding a familiar street layout in a new city. When you realize the way you naturally build sentences in Spanish often has a direct equivalent in English, it really helps fight that feeling of, starting completely from scratch.
Good point. Now, we should probably mention not all languages do this SVO thing.
True. Some use subject-object-verb, for example. Different orders exist.
But for someone learning English, the main takeaway is SVO is king. It's the most common setup.
Definitely.
And consciously trying to spot those 3 parts, subject, verb, object, is going to be super helpful.
Massively helpful.
For understanding and for actually building your own sentences.
So here's something for you, the listener, to think about. When you hear or read an English sentence, can you easily find who's doing what to whom?
Yeah.
Making that a conscious habit, just for a while, it really cements this fundamental building block.
Okay, chapter 2. Let's try to demystify auxiliary verbs, helping verbs.
Ah, yes. The little helpers.
Now, they might seem like just minor additions at first. And apparently, Spanish doesn't always have a direct one-to-one equivalent.
That's right. Which can make them feel a bit unnecessary, perhaps, for Spanish speakers initially.
But what's fascinating is the job they actually do.
Oh, absolutely. They play this subtle but really important role. Auxiliary verbs add extra layers of meaning onto the main verb.
Like what kind of meaning?
Well, information about time, past, present, future.
Okay.
And also things like possibility or necessity, obligation, those nuances.
And the common ones are forms of be.
Right. Am, is, are, was, were.
And have.
Has, had, do, does, did. And then you have the modal verbs.
Modals, like can, will, should.
Exactly. Can, could, will, would, may, might, should, must. all those.
Okay, so let's take our simple example again. I eat.
Good one.
How do auxiliaries change that?
Well, for the past, you could say I did eat, but more naturally, it just becomes I ate. The auxiliary is sort of implied in the simple past form, ate.
Okay, but what about continuous?
Good point. For present continuous, I am eating.
There it is.
And for the future, I will eat.
Right. So notice how am and will, there, they change the timing of the eating.
Precisely.
They aren't the core action themselves.
Exactly. The auxiliary isn't doing the main eating job. It's just modifying it, giving it context, like when it's happening or if it's ongoing.
And you mentioned in Spanish, these kinds of nuances are often shown just by changing the verb ending.
Often, yes, through conjugation. So for someone coming from Spanish, having these separate little words like am or will might seem like an extra, maybe redundant step at first.
But there's a payoff, right?
Definitely. This is where English gets a lot of its precision and flexibility. These auxiliaries allow for really subtle ways of expressing time and modality, sometimes in ways that might need more complex verb forms or extra phrasing in Spanish.
So connecting this back to learning, what's the advice?
Pay attention to them. Actively look for auxiliary verbs when you're reading or listening, and make a conscious effort to use them yourself when you speak or write. Notice how they team up with the main verbs to create different shades of meaning, especially around time and possibility.
Makes sense. Okay, chapter 3, embracing the familiar. We already mentioned the SVO similarity.
Which is huge, a really big head start.
But the good news is, it doesn't stop there, does it? The parallels go further.
They do. It's interesting how many basic sentence patterns translate pretty directly.
Like what?
Think about showing possession. In Spanish, mi casa.
My house?
Right. My house, in English, same order.
Okay.
Prepositions, too, often. Él es de Mexico.
She is from Mexico.
Becomes, she is from Mexico. Again, the little words and their placement often line up quite nicely.
We had some great examples earlier showing that direct subject-verb complement link.
Right. The complement being the bit that tells you more about the subject or verb.
Like, él está feliz.
He is happy.
Ella es de Mexico.
She is from Mexico.
Mi hijo es alto.
My son is tall.
And mi casa es grande.
My house is big. See? In these basic patterns, it's almost a word-for-word match.
So for you learning, the message is?
Don't underestimate how helpful these simple translations are.
Right.
They give you a solid foundation you can build on. You can start expressing things in English using these structures you already kind of know. And that early success, it can really boost your confidence for tackling the trickier stuff later.
Absolutely. The key thing is to actively look for these similarities, isn't it?
Yes. When you see an English sentence, try breaking it down. See if you can spot a matching structure in Spanish or whatever your native language is, if it shares some patterns.
Like finding a little shortcut.
Exactly. It makes the whole process feel less like, climbing a huge mountain from the very bottom.
Yeah.
This comparative approach is so useful because it taps into the language knowledge you already have.
You're not starting from zero.
Precisely. It's about building bridges between what you know and what you're learning, and that can make English grammar start to feel much more intuitive over time.
Okay, let's dive into chapter 4. The slightly tricky world of to be.
The verb to be. Am, is, are, was, were.
Being, been. Yep, it's absolutely essential, but it can cause some headaches, especially for Spanish speakers, apparently.
Well, one interesting thing is that this one verb, to be, in English, it does the job of two separate verbs in Spanish.
Ser and estar.
Exactly. Generally, ser is for more permanent things, qualities like I am tall.
Right.
And estar is more for temporary states or locations, I am happy, or she is in Mexico.
Okay.
English just uses to be for all of those, and usually the context makes the meaning clear.
Right. We saw that earlier with the examples. Está feliz becomes is happy.
Temporary state.
And es de Mexico becomes is from Mexico.
Origin, more permanent characteristic, but both use is.
So while it might seem simpler having just one verb,
you really need to pay attention to the context, the surrounding words, the situation they tell you, which meaning of to be is intended.
This really brings up an important point for you listening, doesn't it?
It does. Mastering to be is about appreciating its flexibility.
How it's used for so many things.
States of being, feelings, locations, identity. It's a real workhorse in English.
And the advice is practice, practice, practice.
Absolutely crucial. Pay attention to how native speakers use am, is, are, now, was, and were in the past. And don't forget being and been in those continuous and perfect tenses. It's through really listening and trying it out yourself that you'll get a feel for its nuances.
Maybe think about why you'd use ser or estar in Spanish.
That's a great tip. When you see to be in English, try to quickly categorize it in your head. Is this like ser or more like estar? Is it permanent, temporary, location?
Yeah.
That kind of mental check can really help internalize its different uses.
Okay. Chapter 5. The present continuous tense.
Right.
This is where we combine a form of to be am is are with a verb ending in.
Like, I am learning.
Or they are playing.
And what's interesting here is, again, that structural link to Spanish.
How so?
Well, in Spanish, you have estar plus the gerundio, right?
Estoy aprendiendo.
Están jugando. See? The structure is very similar. That's a real plus for Spanish speakers. The gerundio acts a lot like the English present participle, the ing form.
But there's a catch. The usage isn't always identical.
That's a key point. English often uses the present continuous for things that are temporary or happening right now at this moment. Whereas Spanish might sometimes just use the simple present tense in those exact same situations.
Okay. We had that past continuous example earlier. Ellos estaban jugando afuera.
They were playing outside. Past continuous.
Right. And the present continuous would be ellos están jugando afuera.
They are playing outside. Structurally, very similar.
But when you'd naturally choose, that tense might differ slightly between the languages?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah. So when do we typically reach for the present continuous in English?
Well, mostly for actions that are literally happening right now as we speak.
Okay.
Or for situations that are temporary, not permanent states.
Right.
And also, interestingly, for future plans, especially if you mention a specific time. Like, I am meeting Sarah tomorrow.
Ah, okay. So it signals something happening around the present, or something temporary, or a planned future event.
Generally, yes. It often carries that sense of ongoingness or limited duration.
So another skill for learners to work on
is active listening, specifically tuning into verb tenses.
Yeah.
Pay really close attention to when native speakers use the present continuous. What kind of situations are they talking about? Is it right now or just generally around now? Noticing those patterns in real conversation is the best way to get a feel for when you should use it yourself.
Right. Okay, chapter 6. Asking questions. This can feel a bit different in English, can't it?
It can, yeah, because we often mess with the word order.
Or bring in special question words.
Exactly. It contrasts a bit with Spanish, where sometimes just the way you say it, your intonation, can signal a question.
That rising tone at the end.
Right. Though, to be fair, Spanish also uses word order changes and question words, too.
Sure. We had that example, ¿Dónde está el baño?
Where is the bathroom?
And notice, ¿Dónde where is at the start in both.
Yep.
Then the verb está is. Then the subject el baño, the bathroom. Pretty close alignment there.
It is in that case. But what about when we don't use a question word like where, and we're just using to be in the present?
All right. Then we usually flip the verb and subject, don't we?
Exactly. So the statement is, you are happy.
But the question is, are you happy?
Right. And she's from Mexico.
Is she from Mexico? It's that inversion, subject and verb swap places.
And that same idea, that inversion, applies when we use other auxiliary verbs too.
Like do, have, will, can.
Yep. So you like coffee becomes,
do you like coffee?
You have been to London.
Have you been to London?
You will come to the party.
Will you come to the party?
You can speak English.
Can you speak English? See, that auxiliary verb jumps to the front before the subject.
That inversion rule is really, really key for asking questions naturally in English.
Okay. And then we have the question words themselves.
Who, what, where, when, why, how.
And they usually go right at the very beginning.
Typically, yes. Question word first.
Then.
Then comes the auxiliary verb, or to be.
Okay.
And then the subject.
So not where you are going.
No, but where are you going?
Right. And not why you like coffee.
But why do you like coffee? Getting that order right, question word, auxiliary, subject, is crucial for clarity.
So the advice here is really about practice, isn't it? Getting comfortable with these patterns.
Absolutely. Practice forming different kinds of questions. Use different question words, different auxiliaries. It's not just memorizing a rule, it's making it feel automatic.
Maybe focus on the questions you need to ask often.
That's a great idea. Think about the questions you use in daily life. Practice those specific ones in English, really focusing on the word order. that targeted practice helps a lot.
Okay, Chapter 7. Adjectives. The describing words.
Right. Words that give us more information about nouns.
And in English, there's a pretty consistent rule about where they go, isn't there?
There is, and it's a big one, especially compared to languages like Spanish. The rule is adjectives typically come before the noun they describe.
Before.
Okay.
So the Spanish examples were una camisa roja,
A red shirt,
and zapatos negros.
black shoes. Notice in Spanish, roja and negros come after the noun.
Yeah. But in English,
We say a red shirt, black shoes, or a big house, a small car, a beautiful flower. An interesting book.
the adjective is almost always first. It's a strong convention.
It really is. There are a few rare exceptions, maybe in poetry or some old sayings, or when an adjective follows a linking verb like to be.
Like, the house is big.
Exactly. But when the adjective is directly modifying the noun in a phrase, 99% of the time in everyday English, it's adjective first, then noun.
So if your native language puts adjectives after nouns,
This is something you need to consciously work on. It might feel backwards at first, but with practice, it starts to feel normal.
how to practice this?
Just form simple pairs, noun phrases with adjectives, say them out loud, write them down. A blue car, a tall tree, a delicious meal.
Right.
Really focusing on getting that adjective-noun order right helps solidify it.
Okay. Chapter 8, phrasal verbs. These can be tricky little things.
They definitely can. Those combinations of a verb plus a preposition or an adverb.
Like wake up, get up, look forward to.
Exactly. And the tricky part is they often take on a completely new meaning, right?
Yeah, you often can't guess the meaning just from the individual words.
Precisely. Wake means one thing. Up means direction. But wake up.
Means regain consciousness after sleeping, not just wake in an upward direction.
Exactly. And get up. It's not just get plus up.
It means rise from bed or rise from a chair.
Right. They often have these idiomatic meanings you just have to learn as a chunk.
It's interesting how native speakers often blend them too, isn't it? Like wake up, get up.
Yeah, it shows they really function as single units of meaning. So mastering phrasal verbs means learning these combined meanings and figuring out how to use them in sentences correctly.
So the advice is,
Pay attention. Notice those common verb plus preposition or verb plus adverb combinations and learn them in context. Don't just memorize lists. See how they're used. It's almost like learning a whole separate vocabulary of these little 2-word or 3-word phrases.
maybe connect them to your own life.
Excellent idea. Think about your daily routine. Getting ready, going out, interacting. How many phrasal verbs describe those actions?
Yeah, probably loads.
Learning them in the context of your own day makes them much more memorable and easier to actually use.
Okay, final chapter before we wrap up. Chapter 9, negation, saying no.
Using not and don't. This is fundamental.
Right. So how do we primarily make sentences negative in English?
Mostly with the word not. And the key is where to put it.
Okay.
If the sentence already has an auxiliary verb, am, is, are, was, were, have, has, do, does, did, or a modal like can, will, should.
Then not goes right after it.
Exactly. I am not happy. She is not from Mexico. They were not playing.
And we usually use contractions, right?
Very often in spoken English, yeah. Isn't, aren't, wasn't, weren't, haven't, don't, can't. Much more common in conversation.
Okay, but what if there isn't an auxiliary verb already there? Like in the present simple tense with a verb like or speak.
Ah, good question. That's when I need help. We bring in the auxiliary do or does.
Does for he, she, it.
Right. So I like coffee becomes I do not like coffee.
Or more likely, I don't like coffee.
Exactly. And she speaks English becomes she does not speak English.
Or she doesn't speak English.
Perfect.
And what about the past simple tense?
For the past simple, we use did not or the contraction didn't. And then this is important, the base form of the main verb.
Base form. You mean like go, not went.
Exactly. So they went to the park becomes they did not go to the park.
Or they didn't go to the park. Not didn't went.
Correct. Didn't go. We had the Spanish examples too. Eso no es chistoso.
That is not funny. Showing no after the verb es is.
Right. And tu casa no está cerca.
Your house is not near. Again, no after está is.
And then no me levanto tarde.
I don't get up late. Showing the use of don't.
Exactly. So it mirrors the English patterns with not after be and the use of don't.
So the main thing to remember for negation is look for an auxiliary first.
Yes. That tells you where not goes.
If there isn't one, and it's present simple or past simple, and not the verb to be,
then you'll probably need to add do, does, or did to help make it negative.
Got it. This is really crucial for expressing yourself accurately.
Oh, absolutely. Getting negation right is fundamental for clear communication. You need to be able to say what isn't true just as much as what is.
Well, that feels like a pretty thorough tour. It brings us towards the end of this deep dive.
It does. And it's worth remembering, as always, that learning a language is a journey.
Definitely not a straight line.
No, it's a continuous process. There are ups and downs, challenges.
The key is just keeping going, right? Consistent effort and practice.
Absolutely. And please, don't be afraid of making mistakes.
Easier said than done sometimes.
I know, but really try to see them as learning opportunities. They show you where you need to focus.
Good way to look at it. And seek out chances to actually use English.
As many as possible. Speak, watch things, listen to music or conversations, read. Immerse yourself as much as you can.
Pay attention to how native speakers actually talk.
Exactly. And if you're unsure about something, ask. Don't just guess.
Right. Remember, progress isn't always obvious day to day.
No, sometimes it feels slow. But celebrate the small wins. Learn from the stumbles and just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Great advice.
So that brings us to a final thought for you to take away.
Okay.
The next time you listen to some English or read something, could be anything. A news article, a song lyric, a bit of conversation you overhear. Make a conscious effort. Try to spot those subject-verb-object patterns we talked about.
Okay.
Look for the auxiliary verbs. See how they're being used to shape the meaning. Try to actively break down the sentences you encounter using the ideas we've discussed today.
Put it into practice immediately.
Exactly, because it's that active engagement, applying what you've learned to real language that really makes it stick. That's how true understanding grows.
Thanks for listening, and if you found the video helpful, please hit the like button. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so you never miss an episode, and share it with others who might benefit. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. So your feedback is really important to us. And if you want to continue learning right now, here in this playlist, you'll find helpful videos for English listening practice. You might want to watch it next. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.